History books left this part out. Let me fix that. There is a word for someone who kills dozens of people. There is another word for someone who kills hundreds. When you get to thousands, war criminal, butcher, monster. But what do we call someone who killed millions? Today, we're going to talk about some of the most celebrated names in history. People with statues, people with schools. Named after them, people on currency in textbooks. In the Heroes chapter of your 5th grade social studies class, people with body counts that would, if attributed to anyone else, make them the most notorious killers who ever lived. History gets to decide who is a hero and who is a villain. This video is about who it decided to look away from, and how many people that decision buried. This video is about who it decided to look away from, and how many people that decision buried. And how many people that decision buried. Violence that happens for civilization is called conquest, exploration, progress, or sacrifice. Violence that happens against civilization is called atrocity, genocide, or evil. The body count can be identical. The difference is in who's writing the textbook. The body count can be identical. The difference isn't in the number of dead. The difference is in who's writing the textbook. A man who kills 10 people in a parking lot is a mass murderer. A man who kills 10,000 while expanding an empire is a military genius. A man who kills 1 million while building a colony is a visionary. History has different vocabulary for different scales and different people. What we're going to do today is apply one consistent standard, the same standard we use for everyone else, and see what happens to some very famous names. Let's start with the man who has a holiday named after him. Christopher Columbus. You know him? 1492. Sailed the ocean blue. Discovered America. Except he didn't, actually, because 70 million people already lived there. But we'll come back to that. He encountered the Taino people. He described them in his own diary as so full of love and without greed. Quote, 50 men could subject the whole population. He immediately began enslaving them. Every Taino person over 14 was required to deliver a specific amount of gold every 3 months. If they failed, and in a region with limited gold, failure was nearly guaranteed. The punishment was to have their hands cut off, and then they were left to bleed out. The dead were an accounting problem. The quota was a business model. Within 50 years of Columbus's first landing, the Taino population of Hispaniola went from an estimated 300,000 to 500,000 people to effectively 0. Not mostly dead, not reduced, gone. An entire people erased within a human lifetime. Koloska says eventually calculated that in the first 50 years after Columbus, Spanish actions killed somewhere between 12 and 15 million indigenous people across the Americas. Las Casas was there. He witnessed it. He wrote it down. Columbus did not single-handedly kill 15 million people. Disease played an enormous role, but Columbus opened the door. If a man opens a gate and a flood kills thousands, we don't say the water is guilty and the man has a holiday. But he does have a holiday. Let me introduce you to a man you probably know almost nothing about. A man responsible for one of the largest death tolls of the 20th century. A man who was celebrated in his lifetime as a great philanthropist, a humanitarian, King Leopold II of Belgium. And what he did to the Congo was so methodical, so economically motivated, and so thoroughly documented that there is no serious academic debate about its nature. In 1885, Leopold convinced the major European powers to give him personal ownership, not colonial possession, personal ownership of an area of Central Africa 76 times the size of Belgium. He called it the Congo Free State. Free meaning free for him. Leopold never went to the Congo. He ran everything from his palace in Brussels. Every village was given a rubber quota, a specific amount that had to be delivered every few weeks. If the quota was not met, his private army, the force public, would raid the village. They would kill, they would burn. Leopold's soldiers were issued a specific number of bullets and required to provide a severed human hand for every bullet they fired, because bullets were expensive, and Leopold needed to know they weren't being used for hunting. There are photographs taken by missionaries at the time. This was not hidden. It was photographed, documented, reported, and then very deliberately set aside. That the death toll under Leopold's personal rule from 1885 to 1908 is estimated at somewhere between 5 million and 15 million people. The Congo's population fell by approximately half. During this period, this is happening at the same time as the late Victorian era. In England, the Eiffel Tower is being built in Paris. The telephone is being invented. The modern world is being constructed. And in the Congo, a man is collecting severed hands as currency. There was an international response. Eventually, the Congo Reform Movement, backed by people including Mark Twain, Booker T. Washington, and Bertrand Russell, eventually pressured Belgium to take the Congo from Leopold in 1908. But the eventually is the problem. Leopold died in 1909, having never faced legal consequences. For anything that happened in the Congo, he used his rubber profits to build grand monuments and beautiful parks across Belgium. Kill more people than most serial killers in history combined. He did it for rubber profits. He never left Belgium. His statue was in the city center for 100 years. Now let's talk about Genghis Khan, because this one is more complicated, and I want to be honest about that. Genghis Khan is genuinely celebrated in Mongolia. As a founding father, the equivalent of a George Washington figure, he unified the Mongol tribes. He built the largest contiguous land empire in history. Conquests also caused the deaths of roughly 40 million people, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. That's approximately 10% of the world's entire population. At the time, cities were completely annihilated. Baghdad, one of the great centers of human knowledge, home to the House of Wisdom, was destroyed in 1258. The books of the Great Library were thrown into the Euphrates River. The water ran black from the ink. The center of the Islamic Golden Age was erased in days. Unlike Leopold or Columbus, he was not operating from a position of racial hierarchy. He was notably tolerant of religion. He protected trade routes. He established laws. He was simultaneously one of history's greatest builders and one of its most devastating destroyers. Calling great and list his administrative accomplishments. If someone from a different place, a different century, a different civilization had killed 40 million people, we would not call them great, we would call them what they were. The word would not be Khan. I'm not arguing he was uniquely evil. I'm arguing something different. That celebrating someone as great requires us to be honest about what great costs, and that the same standard must apply to everyone. In every case, the framing does the same thing. It moves the deaths from the center of the story to the margins. They become background context, unfortunate side effects. The hero remains the hero. The body count becomes a footnote if it appears at all. We know the names of people who killed thousands, and we teach them as monsters. Vlad the Impaler, Elizabeth Bat, 3 figures whose victim counts are fractions of. What we've discussed today, we remember them because they killed people. History classified as human. We forget the others because history classified their victims. Differently, Leopold II was alive while people who would become the first Holocaust survivors were born. Columbus's actions were criticized by Spanish officials. In his own lifetime, these were not ancient mysteries. They were documented, debated, and then, very deliberately, set aside. People who died. The millions of Taino, Congolese, Central Asian, Chinese, Persian people, they had children. They had languages. They had art and architecture and systems of knowledge. They existed. And then, in many cases, they simply stopped existing. And the people responsible got holidays and textbook chapters titled The Age of Exploration. Whose exploration, at what cost, and to whom? I want to be careful. History is genuinely complicated. Context matters. Judging the past by the standards of the present is a legitimate debate. But there is a difference between history is complicated. And let's put this man on a coin. Curse. History isn't a record of what happened. History is a record of what the powerful decided to remember. The difference between a serial killer and a founding father is not the number of dead. It's the quality of the paperwork that followed. Columbus had ships and ink. The Taino had neither. Leopold had literal PR consultants who managed his public image across Europe. The Congolese had missionaries who were occasionally willing to photograph what they saw. And that was barely enough. The reason this matters now is not so we can punish dead people. You cannot punish Leopold. You cannot put Columbus on trial. They're gone. The reason it matters is that the same process of deciding whose deaths count and whose don't is not gone. It's still operating. It just looks different now. Kind of the habit of deciding that some people's suffering is a footnote and other people's suffering is the story. That habit was practiced for centuries. Habits that old don't disappear when the people who invented them die. Understanding this is not just a history lesson. It's a manual for how a specific kind of decision gets made. And it keeps getting made. Drop a comment. Who else should be in this video? Because we barely scratched the surface. There are dozens of celebrated figures whose body counts don't make it into the hero chapter. I want to know who you think belongs here. If you want more history that the textbooks left out, subscribe. We do this every week.